Katniss is one of the greatest modern teen characters ever written, but the movies only show half her depth. The Hunger Games is based off the book and series of the same name written by Suzanne Collins. Katniss is difficult to adapt to the screen because so much of her character is internal. The movies can't show her thought process or the psychology of her belief system, which are all deeply complex. This matters because we lose context for the purpose of her character. Every action of Katniss is intricately linked to powerful themes about human nature, and this is difficult to believe when the marketing asks you to pick the boy you like the best. Don't get me wrong, I enjoy the movies. They are a fun watch, at least the first two, but there is a certain complexity they lack. This isn't a story about an unbeatable girl boss archer who falls in love. Katniss is a byproduct of corruption. I'm going to add context for the first movie because this is what builds the foundation that drives Katniss the entire series, but I will tie the overall themes together at the end.
I'll still cook you.
On the first page, third paragraph of The Hunger Games is a line that shocked me to my core when I first read it. Mind you, I was 12, but I still think about it to this day. Katniss talks about how her family's cat dislikes her. She says, "I think he still remembers how I tried to drown him in a bucket when Prim brought him home." This is violent behavior that you rarely see for a teenage protagonist, let alone on page 1. But Katniss knows the cat would require food and they're already starving. She only stops drowning him because Prim, her little sister, cries and begs to keep him. This small act establishes her motivations that underpin the series. Katniss will risk her survival to ensure her sister's happiness. But the question is, why? Is it just because they're family? Is it because she's the older sibling? No, it's far more complex than that. A common tool to understand human motivation is Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There are 5 levels: physiological and safety, these are our basic needs; love/belonging and self-esteem, these are our psychological needs; and self-actualization, these are our self-fulfillment needs. Typically, you must satisfy the lower level needs before the higher level needs become apparent to you. Katniss is motivated by the bottom 2 levels, physiological and safety. These are very important, so remember these because I'm going to talk about them a lot. Katniss lives in the seam of District 12, the most impoverished part of one of the most impoverished districts in Panem. Panem is a dystopian in North America that is divided into 12 districts ruled by a totalitarian capital. Her father, the provider for the family, died in a mining explosion 5 years prior. Her mother became deeply depressed and her sister is too young to fend for herself, so Katniss is forced to replace her father's role to survive. Her days are consumed with fulfilling physiological needs like food, water, and warmth by hunting, gathering, and trading on the black market. Katniss is also motivated to ensure the safety of her family. This is rooted in her significant trauma. At 11 years old, Katniss experienced the loss of 2 parents. Her mother's emotional abandonment led to the near starvation of her and her sister, of which she is significantly resentful for. She became distrustful, guarded, and hesitant to rely on anyone but herself, creating a hostile demeanor. Katniss also became deeply maternal towards Prim because she didn't want her sister robbed of a mother as well. Prim is the only person privy to Katniss's loving side. Since Katniss couldn't control the death of her father, which she still has nightmares about, she is determined to control the survival of her sister. Prim is also innocent, a healer, and sees the beauty in things. Her goodness must be protected, but this is something Katniss can't guarantee because of the Hunger Games. Each year, a boy and a girl from each district are selected by lottery to participate in a televised fight to the death. The event is entertainment for the capital and a retribution for the district's past rebellion. The game is inherently designed against the poor. Children can enter their names more times for food and oil rations. Katniss's protectiveness of Prim is why, despite the physiological need for rations, she does not allow her to enter her name more times. It is also why Katniss volunteers to take Prim's place when her name is drawn, even though it is a death sentence. Like keeping the cat, Katniss makes an anti-survival choice for the betterment of Prim. Her goal becomes to win the Hunger Games, not just to stay alive, but to ensure the survival of her family when she gets back. Both of these needs are intertwined with Katniss's personality, which affects her likelihood of surviving the games. Katniss's prolonged duty to sustain her family has enhanced her resourcefulness, strategy, and archery skills. Though she only shows it to those closest to her, she is naturally compassionate. These become her key strengths in the games. Before she has her bow, Katniss uses traps for food. She knows to seek high ground for visibility and safety. Once armed, she makes a useful alliance, and together they destroy the others' resources, knowing they don't have the same survival skills. Given her background, it is believable for this impoverished 16-year-old to have skills that make her prospects promising. It's not simply convenience or a cool quirk that she can use a bow and arrow. Ironically, Katniss is skilled in most of these areas because of the Capitol. The Capitol disregards human life with unsafe working conditions, hoards wealth, and promotes poverty. These all led to her survival skills. The Capitol gives her an advantage in a game designed to be against the poor. This is one of the first signs of their suppression backfiring. But Katniss has several weaknesses that do not make winning easy. Her anger and impulsivity cloud her judgment and decision-making. This shot gets her the top training score, but she outperforms Cato, who targets her as his biggest threat. Her mistrusting and judgmental attitude leads her to view Peeta's genuine kindness as a manipulative strategy. This strains their relationship when they need each other to win. And most importantly, her hostility repels potential sponsors. This is her fatal flaw. Sponsors from the Capitol can send aid to tributes in dire situations, but they will only do so if they want you to win. This is why likability can mean life or death. The games are also rigged by the game makers, so it's up to you to win their approval. I remember my friend asking me when we saw the movie, why would anyone sponsor a tribute? What on earth is the point of that? And here is where understanding Katniss's weaknesses are so important. Her contrast to the Capitol shows a divide not just in wealth, but motivation. The people in the Capitol live in luxury. Unlike Katniss, their basic needs are met, so they are motivated by higher levels of the hierarchy. Self-actualization means a life of fulfillment, which very few achieve, so most people of the Capitol are focused with their need for self-esteem. This includes achievement, status, respect, and becoming a unique individual. This is why the Capitol is so obsessed with appearances. Fashion can signal prestige and is a form of self-expression, but they are so obsessed that they have become self-absorbed and materialistic. Their privilege makes them ignorant and detached from the suffering at their expense. The people of the Capitol are motivated to sponsor tributes because of their need for status. During the games, they can bet on who wins and send gifts of aid. Sponsoring a winning tribute means bragging rights or more wealth if they bet on them. Either would increase their notoriety in their community. It's ridiculous, but that's the point. They are so excessively wealthy and they have to spend their money somehow, and it's sickening what they choose to spend it on. Viewing violence as entertainment is another twisted aspect of the Capitol, but I won't be covering that here. In the books, Katniss is constantly aware of the cameras and strategically monitors her speech, but she has never needed to prioritize her image for admiration. In fact, she's naturally guarded. Haymitch even tells her during the pre-interview process that she has as much charm as a dead slug. Plus, her inability to act, which is another trait she never needed, means she can't cover it up, making her significantly less likely to win. This trait is so well written because there is a backstory to why she acts this way. It stems from her childhood trauma and survivalist lifestyle, and she realistically struggles to succeed. It also exemplifies the psychology of an unequal nation. And I actually think Jennifer Lawrence plays this hostility so perfectly for Katniss, even if some of the details of why she is like this are lost on screen. And perhaps not a fatal flaw for herself, but for Peeta's sake, is her lack of healing expertise. It's the one thing her mother and Prim excel at, and she avoids. For so many reasons, Katniss is not a people person. So how is it that she inspires so many people to revolt? This is intentional. Katniss does not have the charisma for a revolutionary leader, and yet becomes one. To understand the significance of this, we must first understand Katniss's belief system. Katniss's two needs, survival and Prim's safety, influence her worldview and drive her actions. Throughout the games, we see which of Katniss's perspectives shift by the actions she takes.
What if they did? Just 1 year. What if everyone just stopped watching?
They won't, Gale.
What if they did? What if we did?
Won't happen.
You root for your favorites, you cry when they get killed. It's sick.
Gale.
If no one watches, then they don't have a game. It's as simple as that. What?
Nothing.
From the beginning, Katniss is a rebel. Her hunting is illegal, and she hides negative views of the government. This is something she shares with her best friend and fellow hunting partner, Gale. But Gale and Katniss differ on one extremely important aspect: vengefulness. Gale is angry at the inequality caused by the Capitol. Katniss agrees with him, but views his rants to be pointless. She thinks, what good is yelling about the Capitol in the middle of the woods? It doesn't change anything. It doesn't make things fair. It doesn't fill our stomachs. In fact, it scares off the nearby game. When Gale suggests escaping, Katniss scoffs. It's not possible, so why bother thinking about it? Gale aspires for change. Katniss accepts her reality and works within the system she's given. A crucial point to remember about Katniss is that while her hunting and hidden views of the government are rebellious, they are acts of survival, not defiance. She hunts to eat. She guards her thoughts to avoid punishment and to ensure her sister doesn't repeat her words, thereby protecting her. Like Gale, Katniss is angry, but it's directed towards her mother. In her view, her mother almost let them starve to death, not the Capitol. Katniss is far more concerned with those closest to her than the broader community or nation, and this line of thinking impacts almost all of her actions in the games. When Katniss shoots the game makers, it's an impulsive act of frustration. The disrespect for her life, them valuing a dead pig over her future, motivates her to shoot them for attention. It's only after, when her anger has subsided, that she realizes it could be interpreted as an act of rebellion and regrets it. Her thoughts immediately go to her family, hoping they won't be punished for her actions. In the games, Katniss's kills are mostly out of survival. Glimmer's death is a consequence of her escape. Marvel is the first person she intentionally kills, but it's for the survival of Rue, her 12-year-old ally. She kills Cato out of pity because his death by dog is a brutal one. Her compassion leads her to end his suffering. In the books, she does think about killing out of annoyance and competitiveness. Honestly, who wouldn't in this situation, but she never does. When Katniss allies with Rue, it's because Rue reminds her of Prim and of herself. Rue is innocent and fragile, but also adventurous and clever. She isn't the best choice for survival, but she is worth protecting. Rue's death is Katniss's turning point. By witnessing the senseless brutality the Capitol forces, she starts to understand Gale's rage against the government. Her flowers give meaning to what would otherwise be considered an inconsequential death by the Capitol. Katniss also isn't heartless. She cries for what really matters. The lullaby she sings to Rue is about hope. She sings it to a child with no future. And spoiler alert, okay, for the last book in the series, but she later references this same lullaby with her own children. Her children who have a hopeful future. It's a painful reminder of the unnecessary suffering that leads to a peace that should have always been possible. Katniss commits to avenge Rue by winning, but this is still very much a personal vendetta driven from personal experience. Peeta and Katniss are forced to face off, but neither will kill the other, so Katniss suggests they both eat poisonous berries. It's a spur-of-the-moment decision to outsmart the game makers. No victor means the game makers fail the Capitol, so she suspects they'll stop her so they avoid punishment. This act is still out of survival for herself and someone she cares about. It's not about rebelling, but it makes her a target because she inadvertently showed that the Capitol doesn't have complete control. Because remember, the games are technically rigged, and there's only supposed to be one victor. Katniss is unintentionally rebellious, and that's exactly why she inspires change. People resonate with her raw acts of humanity because she's authentic. She has no agenda. Katniss naturally protects the vulnerable, grieves unnecessary loss, and breaks corrupt rules. She brings the sensationalism of the games back to reality. While she may be considered unlikable and poor-mannered by the Capitol, she is considered real by the districts. I do think the movies show this decently, but the underlying details do get muddied, and a lot of this is because the context comes from Katniss's internal dialogue, which is difficult to translate to the screen.
You know, if I'm gonna die, I want to still be me.
I just can't afford to think like that.
The night before the games, Peeta questions the control he has over his sense of self and agency. Meanwhile, Katniss can't afford to consider death because she has to live for her sister. She also doesn't understand the point of dying with nobility because there's nothing noble about this situation. But later, her perspective changes. It's Peeta's words, in combination with Gale's, that encourage her to lay flowers for Rue. She memorializes Rue as something more than a game piece. She gives her death a form of agency. However, outside of this, Katniss remains relatively unchanged by the end. She's still a survivor. Unlike Peeta, Katniss has never had the luxury of exploring her identity outside of survival. She values herself only in her ability to protect and provide. Do you remember what the people in the Capitol chase? Self-esteem? Katniss has very little of it because she's so consumed with her basic needs. When District 12 acknowledges her volunteering, she believes it's because of the relationships they had with her father or because they love Prim. And she hardly believes Peeta when he says his mom thought she could win. Katniss underestimates the perception people have of her. She doesn't recognize that District 12 admires her for ensuring her family's survival and rebuilding their home. To her, it was just something that was necessary. This is also why she constantly misjudges Peeta for strategizing against her, when everything he does is actually to get her to win. While Katniss struggles to recognize how people feel towards her, she is incredibly empathetic to other people. She views Effie as idiotic, but admires her determination. When she kills the boy who kills Rue, she thinks about his family crying for him back home. And I think this is an interesting part of her personality that doesn't get talked about enough because it's not really shown in the movies.
Ladies and gentlemen from District 12, Katniss Everdeen, the girl on fire!
In the Capitol, Katniss's identity is shaped by the adults around her. It's her stylist, Cinna, who creates the girl on fire. It's Cinna's idea to dress Katniss and Peeta as a team. Cinna's desire to make an impression is partly because he believes Katniss is worthy of it, and partly because he does have an agenda. Unlike the rest of the Capitol, who view brutality as entertainment, Cinna doesn't seem to support it. Making Katniss memorable is a subtle statement. Katniss is also named after a plant. Her father used to say, "As long as you can find yourself, you'll never starve." Katniss struggles with self-doubt throughout this series and almost loses herself because of it. The mockingjay pin is probably the best reflection of Katniss's identity. Mockingjays are a product of mockingbirds and jabberjays, which is a capital engineered bird created to repeat conversations of the enemy. But it was a failed war tactic. The resulting mockingjays, who can repeat tunes but no longer human speech, represent a mistake by the Capitol. Katniss recognizes this symbol as a mistake, but she is also reminded of her father, who was known for his beautiful singing voice, a voice that made birds listen. Katniss is also gifted with a beautiful voice, and it's what makes Peeta notice her in school. The pin is also why Rue decides to trust Katniss, because singing to mockingjays is a common communication tool from her district. Singing is significant. It's something her father is known for, something Peeta crushes on her for, and what Rue loves the most in the world. Katniss says, "I rank music somewhere between hair ribbons and rainbows in terms of usefulness. At least rainbows give you a tip about the weather." Singing may not be needed to survive, but it's a part of what makes life worth living. Art is about beauty, emotion, and connection. She used to create songs with her father before he passed, but doesn't anymore. People also sing when they're happy. Now, she rarely sings, only for Prim. In the books, the pin is also given to her by the mayor's daughter, and it does have some historical significance, and it does become a symbol of rebellion, but I'm not going to be unpacking those stories today. The point is there is duality. Do you see the mockingjay as an embarrassing mistake or a beautiful accident? Do you see positivity or negativity? Which leads me to my favorite thing to talk about in this series, the love triangle.
I'm never having kids.
I might, if I didn't live here.
But you do live here.
I know, but if I didn't.
In the beginning, Katniss doesn't want children because she'd be subjecting them to possible death. She is also so consumed with her basic needs that she doesn't have time to consider her need for love and friendship the next level on the hierarchy. When Katniss befriends Gale, it is out of necessity. The two accidentally meet while hunting because their fathers died in the same mining explosion. They form a partnership by begrudgingly sharing knowledge, and it takes months to build trust and become friends. In the books, Katniss says, "There's never been anything romantic between Gale and me." And then she says, "You can tell by the way the girls whisper about him when he walks by in school that they want him. It makes me jealous, but not for the reason people would think. Good hunting partners are hard to find." Even when they become friends, Katniss is most grateful for the sense of security Gale gives her. He fills the void of the protectiveness she lost with her father. Peeta is the son of a baker. Katniss feels indebted to him because he consistently saves her in dire situations. The most significant example is giving her bread when she was 11 years old, dying of starvation, and risking a beating from his abusive mom. This is something that gets lost in the movies, but is very important for understanding Peeta. Peeta sees Katniss struggling and intentionally burns this bread, knowing that his mother will hit him for making it unsellable. He intentionally sacrifices his well-being to help Katniss. This act of kindness saved her family. The next day, she sees Peeta at school and then a yellow dandelion. The dandelion inspires her to hunt, giving her hope for the future. Katniss severely struggles to accept selfless acts of kindness. Katniss knows the weight of depending on others to survive, of which she doesn't like doing. Even though Katniss often sacrifices herself, a sacrifice for her is a debt unpaid, not a gift. This is a common theme with debt and poverty in this society and is an area of growth for her throughout the series. In the games, Peeta admits his crush on Katniss and they become doomed star-crossed lovers. It gives the Capitol something to root for. They even announce a rule change. 2 winners are possible if the tributes are from the same district. Katniss pretends to be in love with Peeta to survive. This is confirmed when Haymitch only sends her sponsored gifts after she plays up the romance. Katniss has never thought about love, let alone been in it. She acts by using memories of her parents and by guessing what Haymitch wants to see. Peeta, meanwhile, really has always liked her. Katniss admires how natural he is at playing love, unaware that it's real. But the closer she gets to Peeta, the more confused she gets, and the more she is confused about Gale. Now, I can't tell you how much I dislike love triangles, but this love triangle is quite possibly the only love triangle that actually works. And it works for 2 reasons. The first is it is believable. Katniss is understandably confused about her feelings for both boys. Usually in a love triangle, we know who she's gonna end up with. If you think about Twilight, like who thought she was gonna end up with Jacob? She's clearly going to go with Edward. But with Katniss, she's so consumed with survival that a romantic partner was never needed, therefore never thought about until she's forced into it. Her feelings are brought to the surface and are understandably confusing to her. The second reason this love triangle works is it has a purpose. Each love interest represents Katniss's choice for her future. There is a reason Gale is so like Katniss, but so starkly contrasts Peeta. In the books, Gale and Katniss look as if they're related. Peeta, with his blonde hair and blue eyes, is a similar description to Prim, the person she loves most in the world. Gale and Katniss both provide for their families, but it's Peeta's bread that gives her the hope to do so. Gale equates killing animals to people. Peeta is exceptionally good with people. Gale is just as hostile as Katniss, which is her greatest weakness. Peeta's kindness consistently saves her. And the most notable foreshadowing is Gale and Katniss's fathers died in the same mining explosion. Peeta and Katniss's fathers loved the same woman, her mother. From the beginning, Gale represents anger, defiance, and rebellion. All things Katniss has, but too much of. Peeta represents love, kindness, and hope. All things Katniss has, but not enough of. Katniss consistently wrestles with these 2 sides of herself. She is both hostile and compassionate. Katniss choosing Peeta, which, spoiler alert, she does do in the end, is choosing compassion. It's choosing a hopeful future and, quote, the promise that life can go on no matter how bad our loss is. This is cemented when they have children together. It's a beautiful signifier of the hope she has for their future, something that was never possible when the Hunger Games existed. Katniss is also a believable match for Peeta. They contrast each other in significant ways. Katniss grew up with parents deeply in love. Peeta has a physically abusive mother. Katniss volunteers for her younger sister. Peeta has several older brothers, none of which volunteer for him. And it's Katniss's survival skills, which Peeta lacks, that save him from nightlock poisoning. Katniss balances Peeta as much as Peeta balances her. The only flaw I have with this love triangle are the names. I'm really not a fan of Peeta and Gale. I know they reference bread, like Peeta bread, and Gale is some sort of destructive force of nature, but I just can't. I still can't get with it. I don't know. Is it just me? But it's fine. It's more important what they represent anyway. Book and movie 1 set the stage for the rest of the series, and a scene that solidifies this better in the movies than in the books is Cato's death.
Go on. Dead anyway. I always was, right? I didn't know that till now.
Cato, a trained fighter from a wealthier district, realizes he never had a chance. His privilege didn't matter, or his strength, or his kills. Even if he won, the prize of pride is useless. The dogs are supposed to be humanoids of the dead tributes, though, to reference the control the Capitol has over its people, even in death. But anyway, the games highlight the injustice of the Capitol. The odds were in Cato's favor, and it hadn't mattered. The odds were in Prim's favor, and it hadn't mattered. Fighting this injustice is fueled by Katniss's acts of humanity. Even though she's acting out of survival, she unintentionally sparks a rebellion that was brewing anyway. Katniss continues to be a pawn outside of the games. Her image is controlled by both sides of the revolution, leading to identity issues and a plethora of other problems. Even though Katniss becomes a symbol of rebellion, this is never something she wants. Almost all of Katniss's actions in this series are driven from a personal place, not for the needs of the rebellion or even the good of Panem. Katniss has naturally moral values but does not seek power. Why is it that those who seek power are so immoral? It is significant that Katniss is a teenager and failed by so many adults around her, and used by adults on both sides for their own gain. These adults, who are supposed to build a better future for the next generation, actively destroy it. Katniss begins the games with trauma, and she wins the games with even more. This damage only increases throughout the series. Remember, Katniss's main goal is to win the Hunger Games so she can ensure the survival of her family. Katniss wins, but ultimately puts her family in more danger. This ties back to the major theme of the series, how power and corruption showcase the destructiveness of human nature. All this devastation could be avoided with a better structured society in the first place, void of power-hungry leaders and vengeful values. I actually reread the last 2 chapters of Mockingjay in preparation for this video, and I forgot how devastating that book is. I'm telling you, the movies do not touch the direness of that ending with a 50-foot pole. Even the epilogue, although it's hopeful, is just riddled with trauma. And I completely forgot that the cat comes back and she feeds him bacon, and that just broke me. I thought maybe I would go through the other books, but I really don't think I could, because that book is very dark and incredibly sad. I will forever be so disappointed that they split Mockingjay into 2 movies. And those 2 movies, we didn't even get very good movies out of them. The last thing I want to say is that in terms of the Hunger Games movie, I really do enjoy it. I want to make that clear. I'm not saying this movie is bad. There are a couple cringy moments, but overall, I think this is a pretty decent adaptation. The casting is quite possibly the best casting I've ever seen for a book to movie adaptation. I like a lot of the costumes. I also really loved the added scenes of Snow and the Game Makers. But even still, this is just a case that the book is better than the movie. I know I didn't cover everything, but maybe I will eventually. Who knows? So subscribe for that possibility. I hope you have a beautiful night and a lovely day. Thank you so much for watching.